What inspired Surrealism? People often describe the art movement of Surrealism as strange, dreamlike, or irrational, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Surrealism was a deliberate, deeply thought-out response from the part of the artist to reflect the current socio-political needs. It wasn't created to just be bizarre. It was born from a deep dissatisfaction with logic, with reason, and with a world that no longer felt trustworthy. In the early 20th century, artists began to ask a dangerous question. What if reality isn't the highest truth? What if the real world exists beneath the surface, in dreams, instincts, visions, and spiritual experiences? To understand Surrealism, we need to look far beyond the art itself, into psychology, science, mysticism, and even images created thousands of years before the movement had a name. What Surrealism really is. Surrealism formally emerged in the 1920s, guided by poet and theorist André Breton. In his Surrealist manifesto, Breton described Surrealism as a way of accessing pure psychic automatism. This meant that the works themselves were secondary. They were artifacts of the process. The phrase, pure psychic automatism, is important. It means that Surrealism wasn't about style. It was about state of mind. Surrealists wanted to bypass conscious thought, the part of the mind shaped by education, morality, and social rules, and reach something older, deeper, and more primal. Breton firmly asserted that above all, Surrealism was a revolutionary movement. Indeed, the movement was greatly influenced by movements like communism and anarchism. It was also influenced by the Dada movement of the 1910s. Surrealism and dialectics. The Surrealists believed that in their art, there must be full range of imagination in the interpretation, according to the Hegelian dialectic. Surrealists also looked to Marxist dialectics, which is a successor of Hegelian dialectic, a method to examine societal and economic behaviors. While Hegelian dialectics focus more on ideas and the synthesis of them, Marxist dialectics focus more on the material condition of things. In a dialectical relationship, ideas mutually impact each other, causing either development or negation. Through dialectical development, ideas can flourish and become more complete versions of themselves. Dialectical negation is also not a negative endpoint. It actually leads to new conditions for further development or negation by being a contradiction that gives rise to a new subject. By applying these ideologies to their work, the Surrealists managed to balance the thin line between art, the artist, and the interpretation of the art. When delving into materials such as dreams, the artist wanted there to be the discourse on the interpretation, as the true meaning could be hidden to even the artists themselves. What mattered wasn't a single reason, but the tension between meanings. Freud, dreams, and the unconscious. One of the most powerful influences on Surrealism was Sigmund Freud. Freud believed dreams were not random images, but coded messages from the unconscious mind. They would reveal desires, fears, and instincts that conscious thought would normally suppress. Surrealists took this idea to heart, using it as a base concept to many of their pieces. They believed that dreams could be portals, spaces where truths could appear without censorship. That's why Surrealist images feel illogical, yet emotionally precise. They don't explain, they reveal. The id, the primal core. Freud's concept of the id was especially seductive to Surrealists. The id represents the most primitive layer of the psyche: desire, fear, hunger, sexuality, aggression. Surrealist artists weren't interested in politeness or restraint. They were the type of people who would insist on skipping the small talk and jump straight to more pleasant topics like deep-seated traumas in your past. They wanted honesty, even if it was uncomfortable. That's why in Surrealist art, bodies merge, fragment, or mutate. It's why eroticism and violence intersect and coexist in these spaces, why these images feel both intimate and disturbing. This wasn't shock for shock's sake, it was exposure. Automatism, surrender as creation. One of the most radical surrealist practices was automatism. Automatism meant creating without conscious control, letting the hand move faster than thought. By giving up their control and letting accidental mark-making take the reins, these artists were revealing a deeper, more hidden part of their psyches. Artists like André Masson would draw without planning, without correcting, without judgment. The goal was not composition, beauty, or skill, but surrender. In many ways, automatism resembles spiritual practices. There are trance states, automatic writing, channeling, and meditative flow involved, so as that the artist becomes a vessel, not an author. The automatic drawing or writing techniques were often used by mediums and psychics as a means of connecting with the supernatural. The Surrealists did not necessarily always go as far as to say that something supernatural was behind their automatic art. Rather, it was something that was freed of rational choice, therefore born of the subconscious mind. Surrealists believe that when conscious control dissolves, something deeper speaks, something ancient and unfiltered. Science and the collapse of reality. At the same time, science was destabilizing the world. Einstein's theory of relativity dismantled the idea of absolute space and time. Reality was no longer fixed. It depended on perception. For Surrealists, this scientific shift validated what dreams already suggested, that reality is not singular or stable. Salvador Dali's melting clocks aren't just strange images, they are visual metaphors for time as fluid, psychological, and subjective. Science didn't kill Surrealism, it opened the door. Bosch, Nightmares Before Psychology. Long before Freud, long before Surrealism, there was Hieronymus Bosch. Bosch's paintings feel disturbingly modern, like something you'd see in a contemporary museum, not in a quiet, overlooked corner of an early Netherlandish gallery. Hybrid creatures, fragmented bodies, moral nightmares unfolding in symbolic landscapes. Bosch's paintings have it all and more. Bosch lived in a deeply spiritual medieval world, one obsessed with sin, salvation, and cosmic consequence. His visions were not meant to be surreal. They were meant to be warnings. It's an interesting thought experiment. How much of the world we see for today that we take as granted, as scientifically explainable, remained a mystery to the humans of earlier days? Something as simple as the sun rising and setting due to the rotation of the earth needed a convoluted and spiritual answer in the times of Bosch. The world would be seen through the lens of magic, not rationality, and that would just be the common mindset of the time, not an outlier. The Surrealists saw this vision in Bosch, a painter of the unconscious, centuries before the concept existed. His work reveals inner fears and desires made visible, not through logic, but through vision. Medieval and prehistoric visions. Surrealism didn't invent dream imagery, it rediscovered it. Medieval marginalia is filled with grotesque, humorous, and bizarre creatures. Monks fighting snails, bodies morphing into beasts. These images weren't meant to follow realism. They existed in a symbolic world where meaning mattered more than appearance. Even earlier, prehistoric cave art suggests altered states of consciousness. Animals merge, scale collapses, space becomes fluid. Some researchers believe these images were created during ritual or trance, early attempts to visualize spiritual experience. Again, one has to think about what our ancestors were thinking back then, when every aspect of the world was filled with so much wonder, when the screams in the woods could be attributed to monsters with teeth and horns and man-like gait, not coyotes howling. when there were spirits and gods walking alongside man. To someone to whom this was commonplace, this wouldn't seem like a surrealist experience at all. But in the modern day, it can only be interpreted as a form of surrealist art, as we struggle to make head or tails of the intention or meaning behind the piece, swallowed by time, like the intricate knots of the Incan rope libraries or the Library of Alexandria's books. In this sense, surrealism isn't modern at all, it's ancient. Spirituality, ritual, and the unseen. While early surrealism was heavily influenced by Freud and psychology, some artists felt that dreams alone were not enough. Lenora Carrington was one of them. Carrington didn't see the unconscious as something to be analyzed. She saw it as something to be entered. Her work moves beyond psychology into mythology, alchemy, magic, and ritual. Carrington was deeply interested in alchemy, an ancient symbolic system concerned not with turning lead into gold, but with transformation of self. In alchemical imagery, processes like dissolution, death, and recombination represent inner change. These ideas appear constantly in Carrington's paintings. In works like The Alchemist and The Pomps of the Subsoil, figures engage in strange rituals, surrounded by hybrid creatures, cauldrons, eggs, and lunar symbols. These are not random images. They represent transformation, initiation, and the collapse of fixed identity. Carrington also rejected Freud's framing of women as symbols rather than creators. She saw women not as muses of manifestations of male desire, but as sorcerers, alchemists, and mythmakers. In her paintings, women are often engaged in acts of creation. These are images of agency, not fantasy. Through Carrington, surrealism becomes less about exposing the unconscious and more about communing with it. Her work suggests that dreams are not puzzles to be solved, but doorways, and that art, like ritual, can be a form of transformation. Why surrealism still matters. Surrealism endures because it speaks to something timeless, that feeling that reality is fragile, that logic doesn't explain everything, that meaning lives beneath the surface. In a world shaped by uncertainty, surrealism reminds us to look inward, to listen to dreams, instincts, and imagination. Not everything important can be measured. Not every relationship or feeling is quantifiable. Some truths must be felt. Surrealism was inspired by science, psychology, war, ancient visions, and spiritual experience. It reminds us that art is not just representation, it is revelation. And sometimes the most honest images come not from thinking harder, but from letting go. If this made you see art a little differently, like the video, subscribe, and follow TERAVARNA for more art history and creative exploration.